Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Flame, and welcome back to Flame Aerospace with Kerbal Space Program using RP-1 Real Solar System, Realism Overhaul, and Principia. Without further ado, we do have many things to cover in this episode. I think I have about 9 launches that I have coming up for you guys. So it's going to be a long one. As I stated in the last episode, we will be seeing our new launch vehicle intended for launching our early lunar probes to the moon. I did end up having to change some things in the launch complex to be able to support the launch vehicle that I already started building for it. The main thing being I added 2 more stages essentially. I mean, they're just boosters, but 2 stages nonetheless. But that was the main thing with that one. I also did end up changing some things with our current launch vehicle for our kind of just for a more intended purpose of being used for low Earth orbit satellites. As I do end up finishing our early light satellite program a little bit later on in the episode, and we'll end up picking up the early Earth observation satellite contract, I guess program. In the background, you do see a little sneak peek of our newest launch vehicle that will be shown later in the episode. But that's our upper stage to get it to the moon. And I actually use this design as well in our current launch vehicles as a kind of an upgrade, just to give it more of a fine orbit kind of handling, essentially, by using that Gamma 2 engine rather than just solid rocket motors. But yeah, the Shocker 1 Luna mission that I've made, pretty proud of for the most part. It does perform relatively well later on in the episode. I will just give a heads up, the last stage of the mission, which is just the satellite, is only 30 kilograms, so that will play a big part in something that happens later in the episode. But other than that, we do have some other construction things going on. As you can see, we are still building the launch complex for the Shocker missions, and we are completing an upgrade for the astronaut complex. And additionally, we did pick up the tracking station upgrade, or at least we started constructing it, which I believe ends in 1959, or early 1959. And now you can see in the background we are upgrading our current launch vehicle, the Gallant series of launch vehicles, to have that upgraded last stage to have a more fine control in orbit. And the Gamma 2 is pretty reliable as an engine on its own, especially since, considering we're still in 1958 at this time. It's like 96% reliable, just starting out. So that engine is going to help us a pretty good amount, just starting out. Other than that, it's not too many other changes that I've done. Everything's kind of still the same. As we've been talking, I have been adding more scientists or researchers and engineers, so we can kind of speed up the process that we're researching things and building things as well. And also, since we do end up changing the design of our current launch vehicle, we do end up modifying our current launch complex just to be able to support that. And we additionally don't add the RCS initially, but we end up adding that later on, and we'll modify the launch complex then to also support the additional fuel that will be on that launch complex. And other than that, as you can see, we just have our construction queue there with the 4 things being built at once, and we're still making pretty good money. But yeah, we end up just warping until the Commoner 6 mission is ready, and we take a final look at our tech nodes before we end up launching Commoner 6 on March 27th, 1958. unfortunately here, we do see that the Gamma 2 engine that we recently added does not succeed in igniting for its very first ignition in the series. So we are left to leave Commoner 6 to burn up in the atmosphere, unable to complete its mission. So unfortunately with that, all we can do is move on from it. But on the bright side, we do see that 1959 orbital rocketry is going to be researched here in a second. That will allow us to use some new engines that will be on our new launch vehicle, mainly being some first and second stage engines, which we will see eventually, and I will point that out to you guys once we get there. But other than that, that's the only thing that's completed there. But we do have the launch of Commoner 7 on May 19th, 1958. Commoner 7's mission ends up running very well, as you'll see in the background. Its intended mission was for the atmospheric analysis contract, which is one of the second to last missions for the early satellite program, I believe, that at least I wanted to complete. And it ends up doing this pretty well. It's using the new payload as the Commoner 6 was as well, with the Gamma 2 engine. You can see the Gamma 301 engine lining up in the background. The intended orbit is, I believe it's above 300 kilometers for the perigee, and below 600 or 1 million kilometers, or sorry, 1,000 kilometers for its apogee. But yeah, other than that, it does end up performing very well. These starting rockets that I've made have been pretty well for the most part. They're very modular in a sense. That being said, I can use some engines on some and not vice versa, but still, they're pretty modular for the most part. But with that, Commoner 7 is in orbit with a apogee of about 675 kilometers and a perigee of about 375 kilometers. The only thing that's required, that's left to do, is to run a thermometer scan and a pressure scan. We do have to force run those in this instance since we've already done those in this scenario. So we end up doing that, and we let it sit for about a minute, and it completes the contract for us. But other than that, a very well success. Okay, and now that Commoner 7 has completed its intended mission, we are on to Commoner 8, which will be our next launch. But before that, we do end up grabbing another tech node and another contract, which will be our Sun synchronous contract, which I actually think we already picked up, but we will end up doing that. That will be Commoner 8's intended mission. We do end up picking up the digital communications tech node, so we can upgrade our tracking station a little bit more, as well as being able to upgrade our communications tech level, which is at 1 in the current instance. And as you can see in the background, basically the timeline for our lunar missions will be around 1959, in the early stages of 1959. So we're almost there, about halfway there, and then we'll get started with those missions. But before then, we do have the launch of Commoner 8 on July 8th, 1958. Also, I think I forgot to mention it, but I believe we did end up upgrading our LR-79 engine to the S3D engine, I think it is. Basically just the upgraded LR-79 engine. We really just needed that after we ended up changing out our final stage for the Gamma 2 engine. Just to be able to have it above a 1.0 thrust to weight ratio, so we could actually like lift off the pad. So that's really the only other thing worth mentioning. But yeah, Commoner 8 is, like I said, intended for the Sun synchronous contract. With the help of the Gamma 2 engines, it will have a good eccentricity, which I believe is what is a requirement there for the contract. Yeah. And with that, the mission for Commoner 8 is a success. It has about the same orbit as Commoner 7. And I also added the magnetic scan experiment, which will run to give us some extra science. So yeah, very successful mission there. And with that, we end up picking up the early Earth observation satellite program and completing the early light satellite program. We ended up picking up the early Earth observation sats on breakneck speed, which costed us some reputation, or no, it's confidence. Yeah, costed us some confidence, but we should be able to get that done before 1961. So I did it on breakneck, so I get some more funding over a shorter period of time. Both our early lunar satellites program and the early Earth observation satellite program will end in 1961. That's our deadline. So we should be able to do that for the most part. I probably should have waited on picking up the early Earth observation sats program, as I didn't have some of the tech, that being the research tech that I needed in order to actually run the experiments that the contracts require. But we should be able to get that before we hit the deadline for the most part. We end up starting research on it, and I think it'll be done in the 60s, like 1960 on the dot, basically. But I do end up picking up the contracts just so I can run some simulations off screen and make sure those work. Now you can see in the background we are adding our Baby Sergeant cluster back to the stack of staging. This is intended for our next launch, which we do need to get into a highly elliptical orbit. This is for the Cosmic Ray Satellite contract, which is the second one, which is yet to be beyond low Earth orbit. So that solid rocket motor stage will help us get there quite well. We also end up adding the RCS to the Gamma stage on our Galleon launch vehicle. And I think you saw right there, we ended up upgrading the LR-79 engine. One thing noting for the RCS is I will be using HTP. We actually don't add the HTP for a while, so just keep that in mind. But we don't really need it right now. So yeah, without further ado, we can go ahead and get into our next launch, which will be Commoner 9, which launches on August 25th, 1958. And with that, Commoner 9 is a outstanding success. We end up getting into orbit, which its orbit was about 225 kilometers by somewhere around 60,000 kilometers, which was well in the ranks of the contract requirements. The contract requirements required it to stay in orbit for at least 45 days, so that will stay up for another couple of months, as well as keeping electric charge on board and transmitting 75% of video imaging and cosmic ray science until the completion of the contract. which it ends up doing, as we'll see later on in the video. But yeah, since it's going into such a high orbit, we are getting a lot of science from it going so high into Earth orbit, so that will surely give us some good funds to start researching some better nodes. And like I said, that ended up getting us about 24 science. So the one node that we researched was early human spaceflight electronics research, which that was 18 science on its own, so that took a pretty penny out. We do end up finishing construction on the tracking station, as well as the construction of the new launch complex. And since that launch complex is finally completed, we are able to start building our first Shocker launch vehicle, or correction, Shocker mission on the Sentry launch vehicle. And as you can see in the background, that's a little sneak peek at what the Sentry launch vehicle looks like right now as we add it to our plans and start integrating it. My current plans for the science we're getting are going to be for entry, descent, and landing. Entry, descent, and landing will help us for a later mission, which will most likely be in it will be in the next episode, hopefully, which will help us return something from orbit or a suborbital trajectory. And yeah. Additionally, in the background, we're just adding the engineers from the first launch complex over to the new one, and we are getting some more just through time warping. And the engineers here will help us speed up the process of building our first Shocker 1 mission and getting the first probe over to the moon. However, before then, we will have to launch one more commoner mission. It's not the last one, but we will have to launch one in the meantime. As we warp to December 5th, we end up warping to December 1st, where Commoner 10 is launched at the ends of 1958 in order to assist Commoner 9 in gathering some high Earth science. So as I said previously, Commoner 10 will be intended to assist Commoner 9 in gathering some high Earth orbit science. So there won't be any contracts completed with this, but we will get a pretty penny for science endeavors, which will help in researching some other stuff. And overall, just speeding up the process of what I thought would speed up the process of getting the 75% of the science needed for the Cosmic Ray Satellite Beyond LEO contract, which it ends up not doing that because it needs 75% on its own, I believe. I think that's how that worked. But I ended up having to go back and select one of the missions, and I had to just wait there for 2 minutes and it would complete the contract. So yeah, other than that, I'll let the mission play out and I'll talk back with you guys in a minute. Okay, so here we are. I'm just back in the mission view. We just had to click back on the mission and it completed our contract. So that was the first contract completed in our new program. So hopefully we can get started on the other one soon. I hope. Other than that, we just end up getting more and more researchers for our new launch complex, just in order to get this one built up, and that's about it. Get ready for the newest launch vehicle in Flame Aerospace, the Sentry launch vehicle. And as you guys can see in the background here, the Sentry launch vehicle is performing flawlessly. The Sentry launch vehicle consists of the LR-87s, which you saw on the first stage, and the 2 LR-89 boosters. Additionally, on the second stage, which just got launched away, consists of 1 LR-91 engine. And the third stage, which is firing right now, is consisting of the Gamma 301 engine, which we've been using on the Commoner series of launch vehicles. The stage which will get us to the moon which you can see is revealed in all its glory, is the Gamma 2 engine. We have started using this on the commoner launch vehicles as well. So we have a little bit of data on the engine right there as well. We did have to launch into the plane of the moon at our given launch site using lunar transfer node. I think that's what the mod's called. But yeah, as you can see in the background, we are making our maneuver with Principia over to the moon, and we end up changing the reference frame to moon-centered inertia, so we can kind of plan it out a little better. The idea behind the stage that carries the Gamma engine is that we'll fire the Gamma engine, and if we overburn or underburn, we have the RCS there to help us fine-tune our impact. And that being said, this mission is intended to impact and get the flyby contract as well. The flyby contract only requires you to be 5,000 kilometers away of the moon, which will be our situation. And without further ado, we're about to fire up the Gamma 2 engine to send us on over to the moon. And we now have a successful flyby of the moon right now. We had to warp a little bit to get connection with our probe in order to make it an impact. And yeah, we officially have an impact course with the moon with what we have right now in 1959. Unfortunately, like I said earlier in the episode, we did not make the contract requirements of having 40 kilograms impact the moon, as it was only 30 kilograms. But Shocker 2 will be intended to achieve that requirement, as that will be 40 kilograms instead of 30. So unfortunately, I did not record it, Shocker 1 reaching the moon and impacting it, but you guys will just have to trust me on that one. I promise it hit the moon and we got some good science from it. So yeah. But with that, we are left with Shocker 11 on April 21st, 1959. just to talk about Shocker or Commoner 11 real quick. It is not intended to complete any contract, but rather to get us more science. We have yet to use the micrometeorite detection science experiment, so this is what this mission will be intended for. It ends up performing with no hiccups, gets us into an orbit, and it performs the micrometeorite experiment for a little while and gets us some more science. Just talking about Shocker 1 mission that we saw a little bit ago. Like I said, I did not hit record when it hit the moon, but it did hit the moon. We ended up getting about 55 science from that, and we ended up picking up early human spaceflight era science, 1960 orbital rocketry, primitive solar panels, and crew survivability. So yeah, that gave us a bunch of science to start researching a lot of new tech nodes, which will prompt us to getting more and more researchers so we can get those all sorted out, hopefully soon, because we need a bit of an upgrade on some stuff for now. But yeah, other than that, Shocker 2, like I said, will hopefully aim to impact the moon in order to complete the contract for the impactor. We did end up completing the contract for the flyby, but not the impactor, unfortunately, because of the weight requirements, like I said. So yeah. And like you can see right now, we do have Commoner 11 in orbit. I finally changed the ambient lighting boost because I realized you guys cannot see anything that I record when it's nighttime, or well, when it's dark. So I finally ended up doing that. And going back to the Space Center, we end up changing out our Commoner series of missions once again. We end up adding some finer tune controls, using some less powerful engines, which are about like a kilonewton of thrust for each of those thrusters there. This is for like some major fine-tuning controls in orbit, as these have like barely any thrust, which will be needed for a lot of these orbital requirements in these contracts for the observation satellites that we've picked up. Additionally, we do end up getting Comms Tech Level 2 in June 18th, 1959, and we also started construction on the level 3 tracking station, so that'll hopefully get us ready for interplanetary probes, which I hopefully will like to see in the next episode, if I get there. I'm not there yet in recording wise. I'm still just recording as I play, so we will all have to wait for that. But other than that, we are going to get ready for Shocker 2 launching on June 29th, 1959. So unfortunately, Shocker 2 ends up failing. Um, just shortly after the LR-89 boosters were separated from the main body, the LR-87 engine uh, failed. So we ended up having to range safety that one, and we ended up having to wait once again to complete the impactor mission. And after that, we go straight into Commoner 12, which is launched on August 10th, 1959. And this will have the same purpose as Commoner 11, intended to gather some micrometeorite science, as it takes up to 90 days to complete on by itself. As this launch went on, I thought everything was going well, but unfortunately, you'll see as the launch plays out, the Gamma 301 engine fails, which was very surprising to me, as that has a extremely high probability of not failing. But nonetheless, it ended up failing. So we ended up still running the ascent guidance with the Gamma 2 engine, but it still fell short of making orbit. So we were left to leave it to burn up in the atmosphere and continue on to the next mission. And moving on to the last launch of the episode, we have Commoner 13. We are on to some high numbers here. On September 24th, 1959. This is going to have the same goal as before. Hopefully no failures, which there won't be any, kind of. So, but Commoner 13 is able to make orbit, but unfortunately the orbital parameters are incorrect to be able to run the micrometeorite experiment. I believe the orbital requirements were that the eccentricity were above a certain small amount, and I unfortunately made it into a very low amount, which was lower than the low amount that it's already requiring. So fortunately, that was a failure on this side of things. And with that, we are nearing the end of 1959. We got a lot done in this episode, and we should continue that stretch into the next episode by hopefully completing our programs that we are currently doing right now, and look forward to hopefully and probably sending Kerbals into space, and furthermore sending some probes out to interplanetary systems. I'm not sure if we'll get there, but it's a vision. But without further ado, uh, would like to say thanks for watching, and if you guys can, leave some comments down below of any improvements that I can work on. And like I said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of Flame Aerospace. Bye bye.